Nintendo described the original Switch's processor as a custom NVIDIA Tegra processor, when in reality it was essentially a vanilla Tegra X1. However, the new chip, described in shipping manifests and NVIDIA leaks as T239, is very much custom silicon designed specifically for Nintendo and for mobile gaming. Here's what it looks like, and yeah, at this point, what we are looking at is confirmation of pre-existing leaks, but with some additional detail. Starting with the CPU, NVIDIA and Nintendo have indeed settled on the ARM Cortex-A78C, running the ARM v8 64-bit instruction set with cryptography extensions enabled. 32-bit not supported by the SDK, by the way. Looking at the official specifications shared by ARM, there are various cache configurations available, but the Switch 2 iteration of the A78C has 64K of L1 instruction cache and another 64K of L1 data cache. Moving on to L2, each of the 8 cores has 256K of cache, while all 8 cores can share 4 MB of L3 cache. So, the original Switch's Tegra X1 featured ARM Cortex-A57 cores, 4 of them with 1 reserved for the operating system, leaving 3 free for developers. There's a similar ratio in Switch 2. 6 of the 8 cores are available to developers for games, with 2 reserved by Nintendo for running the operating system. CPU clocks are confirmed, but still a bit of a mystery in some sense. In mobile mode, the CPU runs at 1100 MHz, but this drops down to 998 MHz when docked. I still don't have an explanation for this, but memory bandwidth drops in mobile mode, which would likely have an impact on CPU performance. That could possibly be offset by a slightly higher clock. Just a theory on my part. Interestingly, Nintendo does specify that the maximum clock for the CPU is 1.7 GHz, a lot higher than the other specified figures. Again, speculation here, but this could be a theoretical maximum that Nintendo could open up at some point in the future. Back in the day, Nintendo improved loading times on Switch 1 games by downclocking the GPU on loading screens and using the thermal headroom to ramp up the CPU to 1.785 GHz. Faster CPU, faster decompression of assets. Still, this is an established spec point, even though the 1100 MHz and 998 MHz core clocks are indeed confirmed for developers. Let's talk about the graphics hardware, and again, what we're effectively looking at is confirmation of existing spec leaks. Switch 1 used the NVIDIA Maxwell architecture from the GTX 900 series with 256 CUDA cores. Switch 2 uses Ampere, as seen in the RTX 30 series for its GPU architecture. Similar to the Switch 1 GPU, think of it as a miniaturized version of a consumer GPU. 1,536 CUDA cores are confirmed, as are the clock speeds. 561 MHz when running in handheld mode, 1007 MHz when docked. Again though, there is a maximum stated clock of 1.4 GHz on the GPU, and seemingly, according to documentation, developers can adjust the clock rate. But again, it's unclear if running at higher than the standard handheld/docked clocks is actually possible. I mean, if we think back to what happened on Switch 1, initially the GPU in handheld mode was clocked at 307 MHz, but this kind of changed over time as Nintendo adapted to developer needs. Moving on, it's worth pointing out that developers don't get full GPU resources though. Some of it is being reserved by the system. Make no mistake though, this is a full Ampere GPU rated for 3.072 teraflops when running in docked mode according to Nintendo, so by extension that should drop to 1.71 teraflops when running in mobile mode. Not going to be doing any comparisons against other handheld devices here, certainly not when it comes to comparing teraflops. In terms of GPU performance, it's going to be down to the games to do the talking at this point, in a world where memory bandwidth is hugely important and where the concept of quote-unquote flopflation, as Mark Cerny puts it, makes comparisons kinda meaningless. Moving on, obviously DLSS has been confirmed by Nintendo and Nvidia, as has Ampere's ray tracing features. Switch 2 is rated for around 10 gigaраys per second, doubling up to 20 gigaраys per second when docked. Of course, ray tracing is taxing on a resource-constrained system like the Switch 2, so it's no surprise that we've not actually seen any RT effects in any games showcased to date. But surely it's just a matter of time. In some of our simulated tests using a downclocked RTX 2050, we were able to engage ray tracing, and in some scenarios it can indeed be game-changing. Memory next, and again for those keeping up with the leaks, there's no new information here on the hardware side at least. Switch 2 uses 12GB of LPDDR5X on the motherboard leaks seen so far. This is delivered via two 6GB modules. Memory bandwidth is confirmed as 102GB per second when docked, against 68GB per second when running in handheld mode. The speed of those modules is downclocked, presumably to decrease power draw and increase battery life. Nothing new here, but what we can now confirm is that of the 12GB of available memory, 3GB of that is reserved by the system itself, leaving 9GB available for developers. Compared against Switch 1, the older console shipped with just 4GB of memory in total, with 3.2GB available to developers, so Nintendo is certainly reserving a much bigger chunk, proportionately, of total RAM for non-gaming functions in this generation. Next up, let's talk about a piece of hardware that, as far as I know, is fully custom-made for Nintendo, the FDE, or File Decompression Engine. Switch 2 features substantially upgraded storage versus the original, 256GB of UFS storage, which users can augment with microSD express cards up to 2TB in size. But faster storage is just one element in reducing loading times. Data is typically compressed on storage, so not only does it need to be loaded into system memory, it needs to be decompressed, historically a job for the CPU. Switch 2 can defer that decompression task to the FDE instead of the CPU, which should be a lot faster and more power efficient. The File Decompression Engine is a hardware-accelerated solution for unpacking LZ4 compressed files, and all of this is a part of dealing with files within the NSP packages in which games, DLC and the like are stored. And that's the extent of what we know about Switch 2 right now in terms of its hardware specifications, over and above what Nintendo has revealed. But just one minor point of clarification. Throughout this video we've talked about portable and docked configurations. By and large, in terms of how these modes are applied, that is accurate. However, the docked mode is more accurately described as a performance mode. And in reality, there's nothing stopping developers using the undocked specifications in docked mode. It was the same situation on Switch 1 actually, but in the vast majority of scenarios, developers moved to the performance mode for docked play. By and large, the leaks going all the way back to 2021 have proven accurate, which gives you some idea of just how long it takes to get a console to market. But with development kits now in developer hands and some visibility on the games that have been revealed so far, we can get a much better measure of what the system is capable of. But with that being said, particularly when looking at third-party titles, remember, this is just the beginning, and like Switch 1 before it, the quality of those games from a technical perspective will inevitably rise significantly across the generation.